Irene, could you just tell us your full name, when you were born, and where you were born?
My name is Irene Wolf, and I was born in Coburn on the Mosel River in November 1921. I was the only girl. My parents' name was Simon Wolf and Caroline Wolf. And I had 3 brothers. One was older, 11 months older than me. His name was, in Germany, Karl-Heinz. Here he called himself Karl. He was the only one who had a chance to come to America in 1937. He was 16 years old then. And I had 2 younger brothers. One 2 years younger than me. His name was Fritz in Germany. And one, a little one, he was born 1930. He was a little sunshine, he was a little plant. Fritz was dark and blue-eyed, and the little one was plant. And I had a very young mother. My mother married when she was 20. My father was like 12 years older. And we had a wonderful, happy home life. We lived in a small town. My father was a businessman, and we had a live-in girl, which nearly everybody had, and we had a male help. And mother was a very educated woman, and she did a lot of things with us young children which the neighbor children didn't have. And she planned for us to do all kinds of things later on in life. So till 1933, our life was really very happy. We had grandparents in Koblenz who were quite well off, and we children spent all our vacations there. Matter of fact, we all spent when we were like 3, 4 years old, we spent like nearly a year with our grandparents, each one of us, because there was a nursery school, which we didn't have in our small town. So we lived with our grandparents and went to nursery school. On every week, on weekends, mother and father would come and visit us. So we really had the good thing of both sides. And Koblenz was a very nice town, very pretty, and we were about 6 Jewish families in our small town. We had a synagogue that my mother's grandfather had built. Her name was, she was born Caroline Feiner, or my great-grandfather's name was Emanuel Feiner. He lived to be 97 when I knew him. And we were very respected and loved by our Gentile neighbors. We were only a few children, but we were always part of the community. Matter of fact, when anything was going on in town, there was like twice a year a theater group or so. Usually they called on us children to play the children's part, because we were a little bit better versed than some of our neighbors' children. And my father had been a decorated soldier from the First World War, and he belonged to the veterans group, the general veterans group, and he was in charge of. So he was, even when Hitler came in the beginning, he said, this will pass over, and after all, they will not do anything to me. After all, I worked, like a lot of German Jews said, I worked for the Vaterland, and I was decorated, so they will not do anything to me. My mother, who had one brother who was a volunteer in the First World War, he died when he was 18 or 19. And my grandfather had a big picture. It says, the thank of the fatherland is forever yours. And he died my grandfather died in Theresienstadt. So we felt maybe too secure. Mother, as a young girl, was a Zionist. She was in charge of, they called it Blue-White Group in Koblenz, and she was the leader. And she taught us about Palestine at the time, and we read the book von Herzl, and she said, one day we all will go to Israel, to Palestine. But my father said, why, he was already at that time not so young anymore, and he was established. He said, why should we go to Palestine and have land and work in the fields? We have it here. We had our house, the house where grandfather lived in, and we had fields, and we had gardens, and we had a good income. Why should we uproot ourselves? So this, even if we don't have business anymore, we will not starve here. And then it got slow, 35, no more business. And in 38, 37, my older brother went to America. I had relatives in America from my grandmother. One was a doctor in Philadelphia, and he sent to every brother and sister he had one affidavit. So because my brother was the oldest, he was the one who went to America. And then there came the quota system. We tried to had to get a number, and they went sky high. It was a long time till our number would have been there. So in the meantime, I went to finish school in 38 in April, and then the 9th of November came. First they came and took my father, all the Jewish men in town, they arrested, and we didn't know for what.
Who took him? Who took him?
There was one policeman, and he had orders from the higher-ups to go, and the policeman himself didn't know. You see, the small towns, they were so far removed from what was going on at this time. It was more in the big cities where people really knew what was going on. So he came and he said and he was brought to Koblenz. There were 3 Jewish men in our town at that time. So I was home with my mother and my little brother. I had my older brother he was an apprentice in Cologne with an electrician, because the parents tried to have the children learn something. You know, they couldn't go in school anymore, no more school after 38. So he was an apprentice in Cologne. And my little brother was no more in school. He was home, and he was 8 years old. He used to go to school for 2 years, and then he couldn't go to school anymore. So he went in recess. He went to school and played with the children, and then he came home. Nobody called him any names or anything, because we were just part of the town at that time yet. So mother was home, and I was home with my little brother, my father there. So. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, the sirens went. When there was a siren going, that was the sign there was a fire. And then we saw the synagogue was burning. And when there was a fire in the small town, the whole town was always cut up, because there was a volunteer fire department there. So the volunteer fire department went to douse the fire. And there were a group of Nazis who were sent from the city to go to all the small towns wherever there was a synagogue and burn the synagogues. These were not local people. No, the local people wanted to douse the fire, and they were chased away. And so, but next to it was the church, so they didn't want the church to burn. So and I asked the neighbor, please save the Torahs. And we were not, the policeman told us, you have to stay in the house. You are not allowed to go out. So. But we had a garden behind the house, so we were not like confined in an apartment. We had a house on a garden in the back. And in the evening, people would come and say, do you need anything? And would bring us bread or whatever we needed. And then 2 days later, in the middle of the night, they were banging on the door. And mother got up, and there Nazis were on the door with a gun in the hand. And there were about 4 or 5. And they go back in your room. You know, we slept all together, that because for security, mother had the 2 of us with her. And we went back in the room. She put her arm around us, and then we heard bang, crash. And I went into the living room and the dining room, and we had some beautiful crystal and silver and very beautiful pictures, and they smashed everything. And and we were afraid that maybe my little brother, so mother said, maybe our Bürgermeister, this is the head of the town, doesn't even know what's going on. So we took my little brother, we were sleeping ground floor, and put him out of the window. and said, go to the Bürgermeister and tell him there are fellows who smashed our house. And it was middle of the night, and we let the little boy run. All right, children were not so, we were more grown up than children today. The time made us more self-sufficient. So he went, and then these Nazis left the house. Then all of a sudden my mother and I, we looked at each other. I said, oh my goodness, when they see the little boy running on the street, maybe. But then a little bit later he came in. He said, Mommy, he knew about it. He said, Theo, go home, it will be all right. So they went to him first and asked where the Jews lived. And there were, at least Mother had us with her. There were 2 other women who were all by themselves, you know, Jewish women.
Your father had been arrested right at the time where they had...
Before. He arrested him, they took him on the 9th of November. But this was only for a week. Then he came back. In the morning, neighbors came in and said, what happened? And my mother said, here, look. You know, so they went in, and they couldn't believe it. And then they came to us and told us about what happened in the synagogue, you know, that everything was burned. And they went even to some of these firemen and smashed the windows because they wanted to save the synagogue. This was our town. So then we were not allowed to go out, and I remember Mother went with us children in the backyard, and we worked in the garden on the flowers and things to keep us occupied. In the week, and then we sent our neighbor who came to us, he said, please go to my aunt who lived at the end of the town, and she was all by herself, and there was another woman who, with a husband, she had no children home. Please go to her and see if she is all right, you know, just to communicate. So then after a week my father came home.
Where had he been?
To Koblenz, because Kuban didn't have a prison, you know, they only had like a room, you know, so they brought all the men to Koblenz. And he came back. While my father, during this week, all of a sudden during the night, somebody banged on the door, and we thought they're coming back, the Nazis. And we looked out, and there was my brother, the young boy who was an apprentice in Cologne, with a suitcase on his shoulders. When he told us, he said, Mom, I just came home because they arrested his boss. The synagogues in Cologne were all in flames, and Cologne had beautiful synagogues. And he had nothing, what could he do? So he went with the next train, he went home. And we were afraid, because he was a teenager, that they may be coming for him. So we said, we gave him to eat, and he said, Fritz, go to Koblenz, because we had an old grandfather there, and we knew he would be there. So we hugged him and kissed him and gave him to eat, and he said, go to Grandpa, then he is not alone. So he went to Koblenz, and we didn't let anybody know that, we were afraid they would arrest him too. So after a week, Father came back. And I had already a few months before connected with Cologne that I should come as a student nurse, but in November was my birthday. I was only 17. They said, you have to wait another year. A week afterwards, we get a telegram. Please come right away. We need help. And my mother had made my uniform. She knew they had told her what I wear, the blue and white striped, and like the English nurses, and the white apron. And I had everything ready. So Mother was glad that I would be able to go somewhere. And I never forget, if you saw Fiddler on the Roof, and you see the scene where the girl goes to her fiancé, and the father brings her on the railroad. That was me. I had one suitcase, and Father brought me to Koblenz and said goodbye. And he hugged. And he was not usually a man who was so demonstrative. And I never saw him cry. And he put me on the train and said, good luck to you, you know. And I went to Cologne. And when I came to Cologne, my brother had gone back to Cologne because he had heard the apprentice his boss was back. So I went back to Cologne. When I came there, he was there to greet me. And then he went with me to the Jewish hospital. And to me, this was wonderful. I came into a community of young Jewish people. I was before completely isolated. Even in school, I was the only Jewish child. And there was Jewish doctors, the patients were Jewish, young nurses, elder nurses, the doctors. I felt as if I come to Israel or that today, you know. And the hospital was a whole complex surrounded by high iron gates, was decorative, and in a garden, like a garden. And there was the hospital, the nurse quarters, the maintenance, and an old age home. This was all belonged all to the hospital. And everybody in there, only the maintenance man and the supervisor, they were Gentiles who had been there before and they were allowed to stay. Everybody else was Jewish. So to me this was wonderful. I felt so good, I felt better than home. I mean, I was, we started, they called us, I couldn't work as a nurse because I was too young, but I needed other help. Working in the nurses' quarters, we had to set the tables. They called us Wirtschaftsschülerin, that means household helps. But we had the uniform on, but we didn't have any head. The nurses had little heads. The student nurses had square ones, and the registered one had round ones. So this was, we looked at this heads, I said, oh, well, whenever do I get this, you know. So I had a very good lesson in housekeeping. We had to help in the kitchen, setting the tables, straighten out the rooms, and we went through the whole, but we could work in the old age home. And the older people were absolutely delighted with us young girls, we were. And I learned to iron. My daughter would laugh when she hears that because that's what we had to do too. Everything was starched and we had to do this. And then slowly, when I was 18 years old, which was before, they already engaged us to a little, we started with our nurse training. And everybody this was 39. And there were also, the Jewish hospital was the center of the Jewish life in Cologne. People from outside would come there just to visit or meet people. It was really, we didn't even have the need to go out that much. There was a beautiful park not far from us, and we would go there. And then 39, we had, I think it was 39, we had to wear the star, the yellow star. But it didn't bother us. And in Cologne, the people were really, most of us, very sympathetic to us. The hospital was never without food. There were people who supplied food and coal, which was needed for heat and for steam and for everything. There were a few suppliers. They made sure we would get first. People were really, I remember going into not subway, in a bus to go to the city, inside the city. The hospital was like in the suburb. And I had my uniform on. We wore the uniform like the English nannies with the blue veil. And I had my star, and I went into a bus, and I never forget, the man got up. I should sit down. And this was in the Nazi time, a Gentile from Cologne. So this was how people felt actually in general to us. There was a dentist. We didn't have a Jewish dentist, and there was a lady dentist who lived in the street. And she said, "You come." She would tell us, "Come then and then," when other patients were not there, and she would take care of us. Then there was a photographer. He said, "If you need any pictures or have documents duplicated, you come to me. I take care of it." That's why I have my papers from my examination and all this. So we had a lot of goodwill coming towards us in Cologne. But then the war was on, and every night there was bombing. Every night when the air was clear, when it was clear sky, we knew there will be the airplanes will come. And we had designated places where we had to go and help. Each one had a certain station, and we had to bring our patients into the basement. But we took that, a matter of fact, we had a big white cross on top of the roof, and I'm sure they knew this was the Jewish hospital. It was never really hit, the hospital, as long as I was there. Later on it was hit once. And so this went on pretty quietly. Then, and I corresponded with my parents, but I had very little chance to go home. But I could talk to them. My parents had to get out of their house. All the Jews lived in one house then in my small town. And my little brother came to Cologne into an orphanage that he should have schooling. And there was a Jewish orphanage. There were a few in Cologne. And a lot of the children from outside the small towns came to Cologne to have education in. And he would come with his friends and visit the hospital, and he felt as if that was his hospital because sister was there. And but then came one day, the hospital, this orphanage was dissolved, and the children were sent home. But first the children Jewish families in Cologne took the children, and my little brother, because he was the head surgeon, he took him in, and he stayed with them for a few weeks. And then there was another school in Düsseldorf who absorbed the children, so my little brother went to Düsseldorf. At the time he was maybe 9 years old or 10. And the children were very grown up already. When I think about my grandchildren that age, they couldn't do what these children did. And this little one, he stayed in Düsseldorf for a while till this school was dissolved. One day he came to Cologne. I said, "Well, how come you come?" "The school was dissolved, I have to go home." And he went along with the railroad. And he said, "Irene, people are being sent away." This was in 1941. He said, "We help the people to carry the suitcases to the station." This was the first time I heard about people being sent away in whole families. The children were sent, these children who came from small towns from somewhere else, they were sent home. And the people from Düsseldorf, they went already on a transport to be sent to the east. So he went, I hugged him, kissed him, gave him something to eat, and he went home to the parents. My parents were sent away on the 22nd of March, 1942. They were sent to Itzbika, to Lublin. And I had contact with them in writing. I have even cards which my aunt in Holland also got. Mine got lost, but I have the same cards which they wrote to Holland. "We are fine, we are all well," like a prisoner of war would write. But I have cards here I can show you, and with the names underneath. But these cards, I was even allowed to send one package a month to them. I would send medication. I would ask in the kitchen if I get marmalade. I would go to the Jewish community and ask for clothes, because Mother wrote to me, our luggage got lost. That means they got nothing what they had. So I went to the Jewish community where they had old clothes, and I sent for each of them something, sweater.
Who went to Uzbeka?
My whole family.
Your mother, your father?
Mother, father, and the two brothers. And actually, I have even a list here, people from Koblenz and surrounding, who went, what date, how many transports went. The Germans are so orderly. They had it all categorized. And this list I got later. It was published. And my parents are in there, my grandparents are in there. My grandfather from mother's side and grandmother from father's side and grandmother from each one from one side, they went to Theresienstadt. And they went through Cologne, the transport. And whenever a transport went through Cologne, they stopped in Cologne for a little while. And I always volunteered. A couple of nurses would go to the station and supply the people with something to drink. And this is when I saw the last time my grandparents. And my first husband I met in Cologne while I was a student nurse. He and his brother went to an art school in Cologne. There were art schools to train young Jewish boys and girls in the big cities, Berlin, Frankfurt, Cologne. And he and his brother, as young boys, 14, 15 years old, went to the art school. They was in carpentry or in mechanics, metal. And he learned how to blueprint. He was a very bright young man. But then one day in '39, the school was dissolved and two boys were absorbed from the hospital. And he was one of them. And he was my best friend. And I felt like he was like my family to me. But when his family was sent away, they were notified to get ready to be sent away in June '42, I think to Theresienstadt. He went home. The mother called him, "Please come, I want you home." He went home, and after he left, I was sitting one evening. There was like a roof garden, and the stars were out, and I felt my parents were already in Poland. When he left, I said, I'm all alone in the whole world. Nobody is there anymore who belongs to me. But then we were very busy taking care of our patients and the old people and everybody, so you didn't have time to just think about yourself that much. We always had our suitcase packed. Oh, there is something else. I had a neighbor from my parents, an older woman who was very good to my parents. She used to come in the evening and bring them food and so. And I was in touch with her. So I wrote to her. At that time people didn't have telephones, not everybody. If I could send her something, if she would keep it for me. And I sent her that suitcase which my father had, where I went to Cologne with, was a sturdy suitcase. And I filled it with my best clothes, which I had. I was outfitted to go to England, but I never made it. So I put all these things, and I put the family pictures in there too. All the photographs I had. Maybe I kept one or two, but everything else, even a prayer book. And I put this all in the suitcase, and I sent it to this farm woman, this neighbor. And she kept it for me through the war. And then one family, the Lichtenstein family, this was my boyfriend's, they lived about an hour away in a different town, and they also had very good friends. There was a family, the name was Schneider, and Schneider means dressmaker. And he was a tailor. It means tailor, and he was a tailor. He wrote to me. He knows that I'm Charlie's friend. He got the address. And if he anything can do for me, I should let him know. And I told him I could use a knapsack. He made me a knapsack and sent it to me. He didn't know me. And I sent them also a few things which I had left yet, which I thought I can't possibly carry. And I sent it to him. And they also kept it for me during the war. And then one day in 1941, I got a visitor in the hospital. He was a head of the bank. He was a friend of an uncle of mine, who was a brother of my father's, who was a well-to-do man in Berlin, but he managed to get to England. But he had been connected with this bank. So this man came to me and said, "Is there anything I can do for you? Can I save anything for you?" So I gave him my jewelry, and I gave him my papers, the nurse papers. And he said, "I also have things from your parents, from your grandparents in the safe." And this was in 1940, I think 1941 when he came. So then one night there was a bad bombing of Cologne. The city was nearly half flattened. And we knew when there was a bad bombing, any minute they come and throw us out of the hospital because they need this hospital. And that's what happened. They came in the morning or in the evening, and they said, "Everybody out." So we took our things and they put us in trucks, and they took us outside the city in a fortress. The name was Müngersdorf. This was like an old fortress built into, like in the mountain, like Saul here in Marblehead. I don't know if it was really, on one side there were like windows and they had like gates in front, and there was one long walk, but it had rooms. And they brought us there, and there were also barracks. So the sick, the patients and the old people, they were put in the barracks and whatever, and in this fortress. And then they started to send people away. And we had to do whatever we could to help them. Or a lot of the old people, also not so young people, committed suicide. We got them. Some of them came to us and we tried to help them. But a lot of them we couldn't help. And we tried, some of our supervisor nurses were very strong women. They said, "We do as if we had a real hospital. We keep on doing things." And sometimes we young girls would say, "What's the use? This is silly. Why should we go routinely do things?" But actually today I realized they wanted to keep us sane, that we were occupied, that we had to do, like as if we were in the hospital, take care of our patients. But then every week people were sent away. It started actually, a big transport went already 41 from the hospital, the doctors and nurses, but then it was every week. And then they made a little makeshift hospital in one of the orphanages in the city. And because I had worked in surgery, I was one of the nurses who worked in this little hospital in the city, which was a little better because I had a real room which I shared with another nurse. So maybe because I'm here is because I had a few special lucky breaks. So from there there were a lot of, some of the orphanage from the children were there yet. And one day they sent them away, and this was also heartbreaking, I have some of the pictures, the young teachers and the children were sent away. We didn't know where, but we knew wherever they went, it wasn't better than what we had there, even with the bombing every night. But at least we knew where we were. And then this was the Salve too, and I went back to this fortress. And every night bombing, but this wasn't bad. Even the Gentile people came to us in this fortress. They felt safer from the bombing there than in their houses. And this went on till in 43. Oh, one day, it was on my birthday, in 42, I get a letter from my boyfriend, from Theresienstadt. There was never a letter from Theresienstadt that I know of. He had worked outside the ghetto as a mechanic, and the man who was in charge was a Gentile, and he gave him a letter and said, please send this out. And he sent it to me, and it came to Cologne, and I got it. And he wrote about that he is all right, and he wrote about, and I shouted to the others, and this was the only letter whoever got out that I know of, whoever got out of Theresienstadt, you know. So then so we were less and less people. There was 1 year. Then what happened? People got married. Boys, young boys and young nurses, they said, if we go together already away, let's get married. So there was, I don't know even who married them. I think we had a rabbi who came, who was still there, who would come, was in the city, who would come. Anyway, they got married. The young doctor, he married one of the nurses. I saw the picture and film from Theresienstadt, Dr. Blato. He was one of our young doctors in Cologne, a very talented surgeon and a very decent human being. He always gave us a lift. When we were down, he said, don't worry, we will make it, And after the war, we will have a beautiful hospital, and all you girls, we will work together. And so the last transport from Cologne was this young doctor and another doctor. We were 3 nurses and a few older people, and the head of the Jewish community from Cologne, and a lawyer, a few leftover Jews. We were 50. And we went through that. After a very bad bombing of Cologne, we left Cologne. Somehow we felt, all right, we get out of this burning city. I see we were not sad, because all of a sudden all around us was everything burning, so we went. And there were 3 Nazi SS young fellows, as uniform. They accompanied our transport. So we had some food, what we could take. Oh, we were allowed to take medication. We had, from when we had to leave the hospital, we had 1 room full of boxes with medication and a bandage and whatever. And we were allowed to take this, whatever we could, all this medication we could take. And we had 1 wagon full which went to Theresienstadt with us. We went from Cologne to Czechoslovakia, which means go completely south. It took us, I think, a couple of days. There was regular cars where you could sit in, We came to one of the big cities, and the war was going on, and you could... And we came to one of the, I don't know if it was Stuttgart or somewhere, and the train stopped. We were connected to another train. And one of the Nazis said, let's get some soup. Come on. So he called me and had a big bucket, and he said, put your star. He put the star, I should put way. So he went with me there was, on every train station were like kitchens, where they served people there was a lot of people in whole of Europe going back and forth, fleeing from this war or going back. So there were soup kitchens. So he went, we had 2 buckets, and we went there, and he went through all these people, and he said, go away, and everybody moved away, and I was in back with the bucket. And they filled it. He said, give us soup. I have people, displaced person, not Jews. He said, just people who are, fleeing. So they filled the 2 buckets with soup. And then he carried it till he could see the train. And then he said, no, you take it. So he was a young man. They put in SS uniform. But he was actually, he's a decent human being. There were some of them too, And we got the soup. We ate it. So we had something warm to eat. And then we came to Theresienstadt. When we got to Theresienstadt, Theresienstadt this was in 43, I think June or July. When the first Jews came to Theresienstadt, this was a city like a caserne, what do you call this, where soldiers were in. Like big buildings were for soldiers.
Barracks.
Barracks, yeah, but they were made like fortresses, really like fortresses. And in the middle was a small town. And they put all the people had to leave, whoever lived there, and they put the Jews in there. Because this Theresienstadt could be closed off, it had doors. It was really surrounded by this, and it could be closed off. And then they made the Jews build a railroad. My fiancé, well, the man I married later, he was one of the young boys who helped to build the railroad. The first Jews who came there, they had to walk into Theresienstadt, very far with their bundles. And when they brought the bundles there, they had to leave them there and didn't get them. But I went with the railroad right into Theresienstadt. And then we came there and we had to leave. They allowed us one bundle we could keep. Whatever else we had to leave. And we were only a few people. But Theresienstadt was like a ghetto. People moved freely within the ghetto. And there was like an underground telegraph. They knew we would come. The people in Theresienstadt knew there was another transport coming from Cologne. And when I got there, my future father-in-law was there to greet me. He knew, I don't know how, but there was like an underground communication. And we were designated, we had to go to this, everybody got a number on where to go. And we go in one of, this was a farmhouse, it was 2-story high, and we were designated, 10 of us, on top in the top floor, actually an attic. It was like a stone floor there. And everybody had a mattress. And said, this is your place and this one. It didn't matter, there was a couple on the other side, and next to me was a young girl. So we were just designated today. But later in the evening, my future brother-in-law, who was a young boy, he came and he said, I bring you tomorrow, I bring you some boards, I make you a bed. Because they were there already over here, and they had connection where there was a place where there was lumber and there was this. So he built me like a square, a bed with some boards, and he put a mattress on top. And everybody had a blanket. Everybody got like a horse blanket or something. And we brought some blankets with us. Everybody knew you had to bring a blanket or a pillow when you... And then we had to go to be registered that we would work somewhere. So everybody was, and then what is your background, what can you do? And a lot of one had to work in different things, but they knew I was a nurse. I said I was a nurse, so I had to work in the barrack where there were people who had terrible infections, and I worked there for a while. But it was very it was very hard because we had to wash out the dirty infested rags and dry them and use them again. And the young doctor who had come with me, he worked in the regular hospital. So I approached him and I asked him, is there any chance that I could transfer from there? And he tried, and he got me in the hospital. And I worked there. There was one hospital, they called it Die Hohe Elbe, the High Elbe. And this was a regular hospital with surgery, with everything. And I worked in surgery there, in a surgical ward. I didn't work in the operating room, but in surgical ward. And I came together with Czechoslovakian girls. And the interesting thing is, the Czechoslovakian nurses looked like the American nurses. They had the white uniforms on, or lipstick on, and short uniform. And we looked like from 100 years ago. We had these long blue and white striped dresses and flat shoes, and we were not allowed any lipstick or anything, and we had our hair always back, and they called it our heads on, no hair. So we looked quite different, but we worked well together. And I was young, and I worked as a nurse, and when you worked, you got a little more food. Actually, you had to go, there was a community kitchen, and you had to stand in line and get your food. Now my brother-in-law and my future husband, the two boys, worked in the kitchen as cooks. And this was one of the best jobs anybody could have in camp, because this was food, no? And we had cards, like ration cards, and when you got there, they clipped one day of the card. And the woman who clipped the card knew me, and she would say, Charlie, Irene is here. Then, you see, and they had to go, that was a big bowl, and you went on the bottom and got this, there was vegetable soup. So when you went all the way down, you got more potatoes or more vegetable. It was more substantial. So, and you got it filled up to the top. So this, every little bit helped to keep you healthy. Then when we did night duty, we got like a special ration of bread. And I lived, later on, I was transferred from this room where I slept first into a regular room where I shared a double bed. We had bunk beds there. There were about 12 women in this room. We're on both sides, were bunk beds. And I had the upper one. But this wasn't so bad because I was a young girl, but But I was there like a day, all of a sudden something itched me, and I said, what is this? Oh, forget about it, these are fleas, they're all over here. And then when I was in bed, all of a sudden something bit me. I said, you get used to it, these are lice. I said, lice? So we took every morning, I would take my mattress in the outside and brush them. I brought from the hospital Lysol and put it in my bed so I could keep my bed clean. And because I worked in a hospital, I was able to take better care of myself. I could take a shower every day. I could take a towel home and bring it back. I was there like a year, from 43 till end of 44. And this was the year when they made the film in Theresienstadt. So they did everything to beautify Theresienstadt. Where at the marketplace, when I first came, was an ugly looking big building. It was a factory. I don't know even what was manufactured there. But all of a sudden it came, the factory has to go, and we have to make a park here. Within 2 weeks, there was a park with grass and flowers, and the pavilion where music was playing. It was unbelievable. They made it beautiful. Only when the film was taken and everything was over, then they started to send the people to Auschwitz. So every week, 1,000 people were sent away.
When they were making the film, did you actually see them come with the cameras?
We got one day in the hospital, they said we get all fresh linen. So we never got, we had linens and there was a laundry. It was really very, in a way, in 43 it was pretty well organized. There was a laundry, we got our laundry washed and we got it back. Everything had a name, everybody had a name, and a bakery, and a butcher store where they slaughtered and everybody got ration. All the houses were repainted in pastel colors. We had, when it was warm, we had our patients outside, and I saw on the film the beds outside in the garden in the Hohenelbe. We had them, so everything looked very beautiful to the outside world, but you couldn't really look inside,
So did you actually see them do the filming with the cameras? Do you remember that?
I never saw the camera crew because I was in the hospital inside. But I knew there were, on certain days, older people were not allowed outside. They are designated, they said only younger people were allowed outside, and they were sitting, some were told to sit on these benches and on these benches, and like everything was. All right, this was Theresienstadt.
Irene, can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
Just back up a minute. You never told us about the first time you actually saw your boyfriend when you got there. You told us that his father greeted you, and then his brother came and fixed
And
you.
I told them, where is Charlie? And they told me was arrested. He had worked outside, as I told you, where he wrote me. And one day, there was a whole crew of young people where they worked outside the ghetto on a railroad in a machine shop. And he was in a machine shop. And that's where he sent me the letter to. And a young girl approached him one day, and she said, I have a grandmother in Theresienstadt. Could you take something in from and give it to her? I'm not only partly Jewish, so she was free. And she gave him a package. And he took it into the grandmother. And the next day, this girl came again and gave him some cigarettes and some other things. He said, this is for you, but you take this package to my grandmother. Somebody told on him. When the group came towards the ghetto, a Nazi came and called him, you, come out here. And they found something on him, cigarettes or what he had. And he was arrested, and they shore his hair. At that time in Theresienstadt we all had our hair, and they mistreated him terribly. He lost 7 teeth at the time. And when I saw him, I could visit him in the afternoon. There was a special barrack where, and they took him out in the afternoon for an hour. They could walk. I hardly recognized him. He looked terrible. But another 6 weeks he was in there, and then he came out. But he had lost on one part of his teeth, when he looked terrible. But he survived. And he worked then after, it was just in between one of the things. The occupation of my father-in-law was to collect the dead people in Theresienstadt. They had like wagons, so 2 people would pull them, and then 2 would go from one house to another, and where they were dead, and put them on the wagon, and then they would brought outside. And as I understood, there were even cemeteries. There was a certain time where they buried people and put stickers on it, names. But this was only for a short time. I went once to like a funeral. The father of a co-worker died, And they took his body into a little room, and the rabbi was there, and he said a prayer. And then they came and took him outside the gate where he was buried. But we could be there. So this was only, you know. Then they made, they had, Theresienstadt was absolutely, we had concerts there. And there were quite big artists. We were allowed to go to concerts. They had theater performances there. They had sport events there. So for young people, as long as they were healthy, and it was not, especially in '43, it wasn't so terrible. But this was just one of these things. And then they started to send, after the film was taken, they started to send people away. So there was my future mother-in-law and her little girl, who she was 12, and the two boys, and her husband, and a grandfather. The grandfather was way in his 80s. And he was okay, because every evening we would congregate where the grandmother lived. My mother-in-law, not grandmother, but mother-in-law lived. She was a woman that time in her 50s. She also lived with about 12 women, because everybody was separate. The men lived separate on it. And she had a corner, a lower bed. And the boys had gotten her a little stove in the corner. So in the evening, everybody congregated there. There was like a board on the bed. We were sitting there. And the boys would bring some potatoes. And whoever had something, whatever it was, you would bring. And Grandma had a pot there. And we put it all in there. And she cooked it. And then everybody got a little bit of this. And this was the little extra which kept us alive. One day, there was a transport with old people going to Auschwitz. And the name of my young brother-in-law was named, not the grandfather's name. So my father-in-law went to whoever was in charge and said, there is a mistake. There are only old people going away, and my son is only 16 years old. Not telling that it was a mix-up and stuff. He said, oh, it's a mistake. So they tore the cart apart. And grandfather was never under transport again. And he survived Theresienstadt, and he came when he was 90 to America. So,
should we take a break right here? Give you a little
this
rest.
was only Theresienstadt.
A little rest and a little water. You're doing very well. Your story is so full of interesting details, and so wonderful, wonderful.
I thought she might have.
So should we continue where I went to Auschwitz?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did she knock? Zoe?
Okay. We can continue now.
Okay. So in fall of '44, every week transport went away. And we really did not know where they would go to. We only knew wherever went away, it wasn't better than where we were. We felt in a way a little bit secure where we were with our friends and what we were doing, and we had enough to sustain us. So, but every week transport went on, and they made transport on the high holidays. They usually on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur transport. And in one of the transport in September, my fiancé or my boyfriend and his brother and his father were sent away. And even if it was very hard for me, but I was like the stronghold for the mother and the younger sister. Like I was the one who had to help them to be strong. And then one day I got the notice, you are you are leaving tomorrow. But I forgot one thing. There was one day in Theresienstadt. This was, it must have been maybe in the beginning of 44. The hall was emptied, and we had to walk without any luggage or anything outside the ghetto into a big open area. Whoever could walk. And we all had to, every house was emptied. From the hospital, as many as could possibly walk, and old people. We were thousands and thousands of people outside in this big area, surrounded by mountains. And they left us there a whole day. And we never thought we would go back, that we would get out there alive. And in the evening, they said, no, you can't go back. We never forgot this day. I mean, this was, we all were thinking we don't live. So my boyfriend was with me, and said, let's at least, and the mother and the grandfather. And we were standing there. And Nazis walked around and said, we have to count everybody. But this was just an excuse. Thousands of people all outside the ghetto. And in the evening they said, let us go back. And we were so happy to go back to Theresienstadt that day.
Was it cold? Was it hot?
It was, I think it was in fall. I don't remember that it was very cold or very hot.
And you don't know why they asked you to?
No. But this was the day whoever was in Terezin at that time will remember. Because we didn't know why, or what would happen to us. So after my boyfriend had left, and a lot of others from the hospital, was only a skeleton people, didn't even have that many patients anymore. 1,000, I think we were about 1,000 women, or maybe more, I don't know. Only women and children were sent to Auschwitz. And we went in regular cars where we could sit. These were not cattle cars, And it took us, I think, a day or two. I mean, we stayed, I don't know how long you forget how long it took us. And then we come to, I never forget when we drove into Auschwitz. All of a sudden we said, I was together with other nurses, and girls I knew. And we knew you take what you can carry, you were allowed. And then we were wearing as much as we could. We wore double underwear. I had 2 sweaters on. It was already cool that time when I left. And I had a coat on, because I said, if you lose all your luggage, at least you have what you're wearing. So we wore as much as we could on sturdy shoes. All of a sudden we see this camp. Now coming from Theresienstadt, which was a little town, we had never seen anything like this. There we see people in striped, men in striped suits standing on wire. And I said, look at them, there is a prison there. They bring us to a prison here. Look at that, they're all prisoners. Not thinking these are Jews. And then we saw women they had kerchiefs on, nobody were here. And I said, look at them, they all looked at us. And there was like a station, and then the train drove on that station. And then we see young men in uniform, also with this striped clothes. They had little hats, little caps on. They came to open the door. And then we saw Nazis standing there on one with big dog. And then raus, everybody out. And then they told us, and we want to take our luggage, our bundle. Now leave everything in, just come out and stand in line of 5. And we look at each other. You see, wherever we were before, it never happened to us just like this. So we left our luggage. Now I was a young girl that time, and there were a young girl with me. But there were elderly women, there were women with little children. I had the supervisor from our hospital who was that time, to me she was old, she probably was in her 50s. You know, she was with me. And the teacher from Cologne, one of the teachers from the orphanage, she was also with me, which I knew. And then we had a group of about 10 who had been nurses in the hospital, and some of them from Cologne, which I knew. We were together, and we tried to stick together too, you know, that we were. So we were standing there, and then we see a young man, while we were standing there, we see a young man came by, one of the prisoners, and he said to me, "Are you by yourself?" And I said, "Yes." "Why you asked?" He said, "It's good when you're by yourself. And see that you get to this side." And I looked at him because I didn't know what he was talking about. But then we moved forward slowly. And then I see a group was sent this way, and we were sent this way. The young girls were sent this way. And there were Nazis standing, like, and later on I found out one of them was Mengele. And we were like stunned, you know. We said, "What's going on here? That's strange. What happened to us now?" But we were like, you know, quiet. We didn't. But then we see there is a truck coming, and they put people on there, older women, and there is a woman that wanted to take the child away, and she said, "No, I go with wherever my child goes, I go." So she goes with the child, and I knew her. Was a little girl, maybe 6 years old. So she said, "No, I don't let. Wherever she goes, I go." And she went with her little girl. And then we were standing there in line, and then come and we were sent this way. And then they say, "March." So we marched. They marched us in front of a barrack. We came to this barrack, and then they let us stand for a while, and then they said, "In the barrack, get undressed." So we were, I don't know, maybe 100 or 200, you know, it was a big barrack. And we started to undress. I remember there was a beautiful, I had always short curly hair, you know. There was a girl standing next to me, Czechoslovakian, and a lot of the Czechoslovakian girls were blonde. The German Jews, a lot of them were mixed brown. My mother was blonde, but the most of the Czechoslovakian were light. She had long blonde hair, beautiful girl. And she stand there and she cried. She was a gorgeous girl. So we were standing there naked, and the Nazis walking around. And I think some of them were drunk because and she was crying, said, "Don't cry. Look, we are all together here too." I was like stunned, but I had my wits about myself. I didn't want to go to pieces. I said, "Don't cry. We are all together here." But then I saw one woman standing on the side. She was a very heavy woman. She was a professor. She was a very smart, educated woman, but she was very obese. And they put her on the side. And I never saw her again right away. They had put her through with the younger, because she had a young face. And then they took her out and put her on the side. So then we moved forward slowly. And then there were girls. We had to sit down and they show our hair. And the girls cried, "My beautiful hair." I said, "Don't worry about it." I remember saying that to her. Hair grows again. If this is the worst what they do to us, hair grows again. So, but then we didn't recognize each other. We looked at each other. If a girl has no hair, they look different. All of a sudden, there were some who had like a little mustache. And we thought, "Oh, there is a man." You know, when we didn't look further. And it was a girl, just no hair, and the ears were standing up. And not every girl has a pretty head. Some of them are flat in the back. The boys usually have a nicer shape. We looked at each other if we were strangers. Then I was saying, "Oh, Alice, this is you." "Yeah, that's me. It's Irene. Don't you recognize me?" We were like, I heard once from my grandmother when they shore the sheep, they didn't know how to get home anymore because it made them feel strange without wool. That's the way we felt, like short sheep. Then they put us into a big room, and they said, and that was, they called it the sauna. And all of a sudden water came from this, and douches, and we were douche. And there were some girls who had their period, but there was nothing they could do about it. And then we walked into another, out of there, I think we just shook ourselves. We didn't have nothing to dry ourselves with. And there was a long tables, and they had old clothes there. Not the striped ones like the others were, that was just old clothes. They gave each one a pair of underpants and a dress. And I had a long dress and a man's jacket, an old man's jacket and a dress and underpants, and I think an undershirt, a rough undershirt. And then some kind of something under feet, I don't know exactly if that were like stockings. And then there was a mountain of wooden shoes. And then they said, take one of the pair. So there we were standing with nothing under here, with these old clothes and wooden shoes, all without, we looked at each other and we didn't know who is this person. And then they walked us out, and it was cold. And we don't know how warm the hair keeps us on our head till you have no hair. So what I did, I looked in my jacket, and there was lining in there, and I tore out the lining. I was always a very practical person. I tore out that lining and put it on my hair like a turban, and it felt better, felt warmer. And then I saw others did the same thing. They took it out of the sleeve or wherever. And then they walked us to a barrack. And then they let us stand in front of a barrack. And then they told us, then we went into the barrack, and there were like three bunk beds, 3 stages. And everybody had one horse blanket. And I think there was a thin mattress. So like a rough mattress with straw inside. So we were told, this is your bed. So each one, and then we were there, laying in this. And we looked at each other, and this all happened within a few hours. From a person which came with hair and clothes, be reduced to this, a non-person in this old rags. And so when we had to go to the toilet, they had, in the front of the barrack, there was like a big bowl, like garbage cans. But they were mostly full. When they were full, you couldn't go in, so you had to carry them, 2 or 3 had to carry them to the latrine and empty them, and then come back with it. Once a day, they came with the soup. That was a big barrel like this with soup, and everybody got a little soup. And I felt funny. I always was well proportioned, and I felt naked without a bra. And every day we had to stand in front of the barracks for hours. They made us stand there. And then one day, other girls came who had come to Auschwitz in earlier transports. And they talked to us. And I said, oh, all of a sudden I recognized one. He said, where are you? Oh, we are in the other barrack, but we are here a while. We know our way around. We know how to get to you. I said, what happened to the people who went on the other side, who didn't come with us? Oh, you see over there the chimney? That's where they ended up. They went into the gas, and then they were burnt. And over the whole camp, there was a certain smell. And this was from the burning. like the smoke, but we didn't know what it was. And during the night you could see flames from this big chimney. And I looked at that chimney and I thought of all the people who had come with me and were not with me. And then I thanked God that I was alone, that I didn't have any family with me. I said, how would I feel if they would have come with me? So then one day a girl comes and said, we got rationing, we got a little bread every day. And we didn't eat it all at once, we broke it off and so. So she said, I have a little bra here, if you want a bra. Apparently they knew their way around there. It's like in a prison, I guess. If you give me a little bread, you can have. So I gave one ration of bread to her, and one day I didn't eat bread, and I got a little bra. And I was so happy, it kept me also warm. We were there only, I think, about a week in Auschwitz. I think it was Birkenau, that was the women's camp. I think actually Birkenau. Once I saw a young man, he came there, and he was one of the fellows who had gone with Charlie, with my boyfriend, had come to, and I asked him, where is Charlie? Oh, he is in a different camp. His father didn't make it, but he and his brother are in a different camp, and they're all right. They are alive. I mean, at that point. So after a week, they called us. We had to march out, and they put us in Auschwitz on a big open like a marketplace. I mean, a pell place, they call it, but, and then they marched us from there in front of a barrack. And they let us stand there, and then we started to pray. Because we thought this was the end. But it wasn't. They let us stand there till the evening, the whole day. And then they put us into a train. But we were sure we are not, when it comes to evening, they put us in there, that would be the end. But somehow, I say a prayer and this is it. So they put us in cars, on the railroad, in regular cars. They were not cattle cars, they were regular cars. And, oh no, I made a mistake. They put us into this barrack and we had to strip again. And we had to go through the sauna. And then they gave us other clothes, a little better clothes than we had before. We got underwear, underpants, and a shirt, and a little warmer dress, and like a little bit of a coat, and kind of stockings, and there were shoes laying there, regular shoes, not the wooden shoes. And I grabbed a pair of shoes and I tried what I could walk in. And I had in my hand 2 pairs of underpants. And there were Nazi women. They observed that we all had to get these clothes. And she saw I had 2 underpants. And she whipped me for that. Because I took 2. I always was cold. I always had a weak bladder. It's inherited. Carol has it too. And said, if I have 2 underpants when it's cold, and she whipped me for that. But anyway, so I had to put it down, put one on. And then we went into the train and we left. And we came from there, we went to Oberschlesien. This is part of Germany, between Poland and Germany. And that we were 1,000 women, all young women. And when we got there, also on the railroad station, there were like 4 or 5 Nazis, but they were not SS. This was the group of older men who were drafted to be overseer for the women, you know, that they should go to work. And one tall man, he was in charge of all of us. And we walked in a big, this was like into the country, an estate, where there was nobody there anymore. They had big barns and horse stables, but all empty, and a big house. And they put so many, they were divided into different houses. I was with about 100 in a stable, and there was also we were also in the bunk beds there. And then the man who was in charge, this German, he said, we are here to work, you are here to work, and if you do what you are told, I treat you fair. And we were glad to be away from Auschwitz. So he said, but anything else, and this was in the country, it was like a big estate. And in the morning, and one came, his name was Karl. He was in charge of us 100. And he was an older man in uniform. And he said, you do what I tell you and we will be all right. And so in the morning we got a piece of bread and some coffee. And then everybody got a shovel. And then they marched us out in the fields and we dug ditches for tanks. They called the tank ditches. Now, I was a girl I came from a small town in the country. So to me, this wasn't awful. I was glad to be in the fresh air and in the field. And I had help in the field when I was a little girl. But there were a lot of them who came from the city who had never even had a shovel in their hand. To them, this was awful. And I said, I had about 4 or 5 girls with me who were nurses in Cologne, young girls. We were all the same age, 18, 20. I said, come on, let's do what they want us to do, and they will treat us okay. Let's just go and do it. And then one of the men that this Carl said to us, I need one girl who gets the food. So I stepped forward and I said, I will do it. I said, somebody has to take the initiative and maybe I can be helpful to the others. So there were 4 girls. Everybody had to take care of the 25 that they had their food. So I had to go in the kitchen and I got the food with another girl for us 20. It was soup also and bread. And we were there. We worked there. When did we get there? I must look at my notes.
44, I think you said it was
That
November.
was in the beginning of 45. No, it was 44 because I had my birthday there. Yeah, that's because I remember. In November is my birthday, on the 18th of November. That's why I remember. And some of my friends gave me a little piece of their bread. When they put it together and they gave it to me, this was my birthday present. That's why I know it was in November that we were in this Kurzbach, Trachtenberg. This was.
What was the year, 44?
November of 44.
November 44. And we were there. Is there anything else? Oh yes, this Carl, he went on weekends home to his wife. So we didn't work. One day we didn't work. So he said, is there any little thing I can bring you? And I asked him for needles and thread. You know, and I don't know what I needed it for. I made something to keep us warmer. He brought me a needle and thread. And when we worked, when we worked in these ditches, we made real deep ditches we had to shovel. On the way home, he went over potato fields. And he said to us, look around, there should be some leftover potatoes. And we had buckets with us anyway. So we picked up the leftover potatoes and took them to our home there in the barn. And we had a stove there, a brick stove. And we cooked it there, the potatoes. So we had a little extra. So every little bit extra kept us alive. And we really, but there is one, wait a minute, where did this happen? Oh, that was in Bergen-Belsen. We had a girl with us who was pregnant. And she had married in Theresienstadt, was Czechoslovakia. And we tried to really, she wasn't I don't know how far, she was in the middle of her pregnancy. She wasn't very heavy because she didn't have much food. Little Alice, I remember her name. And when we went to work, we tried to do her part, that she shouldn't work hard. And we kept her, you know, protective. We stayed in there till the Russians came closer. I must have the notes. I don't know exactly when it was. Maybe
I have it written.
You have it written down?
You said you were there for approximately 2 months, and then
Possibly.
around January you went to Gross-Rosen.
They marched us. One day he said, today we're leaving here, but you have to take your shovels, you know, with you. Everybody got half a bread. And we had like a little knapsack. And we put all our stuff on, and we had to take the shovels. Now there was something else yet in Trachtenberg, I have to tell you. When it got so cold that we could not work on the ditches, that it was frozen, there was like a factory where they cut wood. So they took us to the woods where they had cut down trees. And we carried the tree stems to this place where they saw the trees.
The stumps.
The stump. Real, yeah. So we put things underneath as much as we could, cardboard under our shoulders. Maybe 4, 5, 6 girls had to lift up trees, and we put it on our shoulders. Long ones. And we carried these tree stems to this, where there was, what was a sawmill, to the sawmill, where they cut. But the men who worked there, they were from the population, and some were decent men. They left little bags with pieces of bread for us. They felt badly for us, some of them, and they put bread there on that sawmill when we put, so that we had a little bit extra to eat. All right, this was part of when we were there. So then when the Russians came closer, one day that everybody out, we in fives on marching. And we marched through snow and ice. But for a little while, we took our shovel, and then we threw the shovels away, because we couldn't carry this shovel. And then they stopped on another, where they were in farms, big farms, and we slept with where the cows were, but that was warm. And the man in charge, I said, he looks like Moses. They had to walk with us, and they were old men. For them it was kind of hard too. He was a tall man, and he had a stick in his hand. And he walked in front of us. And there were we 1,000 women. And then the old men who were with us, they were trudging next to us. And for them, at that point, was as hard as for us to walk there. The man in charge at that time, he tried to keep us, he knew the war would come and end, and he somehow tried to keep us alive. Wherever we went, he tried to get some food for us, bread, and there was a farm where they boiled potatoes, and then they would potatoes. Then somewhere they gave us raw carrots, but we couldn't eat them because they were all frozen. And we kept on walking. And while we walked, did you ever see Chicago? All right, that's the way we walked. You saw other groups passing you by, and we saw men walking by. And then we looked as if we would recognize anybody. And we always heard afterwards that the men were even treated much worse than we did, somehow. And somehow also, women are stronger than men are. They are. In camp it was shown the women were the ones who tried to keep the family alive, and the men, a lot of them just fell apart. I saw this all around me. We had one woman with us, she was an educator, and she would tell us, girls, we have to go on, and we will survive, and we help each other. And afterwards we had to help her, because she was a little older than we were, and we helped her to keep on walking. And then we had little Alice with us now, and we tried to keep her going. And we they took us from the east towards the west. And then we came to the Oder River. And then there were other people who were fleeing from the Russians, Germans. And they were with wagons, and they had everything on top. And I remember seeing this, and I said, this is not real. This is like if it was a movie passing me by. There are people coming with wagons and with all their belongings on top. And then on the side you saw they made a fire and people sitting around. It was like there were more the population there, Polish, Russian, that's how they dressed also. When you came from the western part of Germany, people were not dressed with the big warm hats like this, but there it was a much colder climate. Then we had to cross the Oder. The Oder was this like a border where they wanted to get everybody away over to the other side of the Oder River. So our commandant, what they called him, he said, this group has to go first. And there was a ferry going back and forth over the Oder. So we passed by all these other people, we women, and he got us across to the other side of the Oder. And then from there, we walked another day or so, and then we came to Großrosen. Großrosen was where only men were camped. And we went in there, and the men looked at us. They hadn't seen women walking like this. All right, we didn't look so glamorous, so they put us into barracks. And we stayed while we were on the march, some of the girls stayed back. They said, we're not going any further. They stayed in the up-down farmhouse. And I said, this is strange territory for me. This is away from where I'm used to be. I don't know anything here. And the Russians are coming, and the German soldiers. What chance do we have? I take my chances with the whole group. But some of them made it. Some of the girls, especially Czechoslovakian girls, some of them spoke a little Russian. And they said, when the Russians come, we can communicate with them. But we didn't. So we said, what chance do we have to survive there? So there was one girl, she said, Irene, stay with me. We make it. We stay here. But I didn't. Took my chances. I didn't know what was coming after, otherwise I wouldn't have. I would have stayed back. So we ended up, after the whole week, we ended up in Großrosen. In Großrosen we were a few days. We were in a regular barrack and we got some food. And on the fence, we communicated with men. We talked to the men. They wanted to know where we come from. Naturally, we asked for family. I also asked for my family from home, my brothers. When I went for Auschwitz, I thought my parents wouldn't have made it. My little brother was too young. But my brother, who was 2 years younger than me, he was about 17, 18, he would have, if they give him a chance, he will make it. He was a young, strapping, healthy young boy. But I never ever met anybody alive from Itzbika. Apparently, they all ended up in Majdanek. I never, wherever I went, I asked, did you meet anybody? Is there anybody from Itzbika by Lublin? Nobody. I never met anybody. So we talked to the men, and some had, this was new to us, some had red triangles on, the others yellow, and we got an education there with them. But we met some people there who had been in Theresienstadt, some men who ended up in Großrosen. So from Großrosen, they put us on cattle cars a few days later. They were open, real cattle cars, and drove us through Germany. We came one day, we were in Weimar, we didn't know where they would take us. One day we were in Weimar, and this is near where Buchenwald, the Camp Buchenwald. And it was during the day, and we were on the railroad station, and there was a bombing. Airplanes came. I don't know if it was American, English. The Nazis who were with us went into the train station, and they were standing there with the ammunition. He said, nobody leaves the train. So we were sitting in the train, open at least when you don't see it, and we see the bombers coming, and then we hear boom, bombs falling. I had bombing in Cologne through the whole war, but I never was sitting in the open, let them come down at me. At least I would go inside or in the cellar or wherever. There we were sitting in the open and see the bombs falling all around us, and all of a sudden, boom, and pieces of stones and wood come into the cars. So we had about 10 injured in our car. Now we were 3 of us who were nurses, or 4. So we made splints for a couple of girls, for the legs and the arms who were injured. And 2 of them, they were dead. What did we do? We moved them to the side and covered them with everybody had one rough blanket and covered them with blankets. And we didn't know what was going on in the other wagons, but there was a similar picture. We were a few days on the way till we got to Belsen. And there we also, the railroad, there's the platform, on the platform. And everybody out. And then we saw all along the platform the dead laying there. Each wagon had so and so many dead and injured. So they took the injured away, and the dead, they were laying there. And then the ones who could walk, we had to, in rows in 5, stand there. Said, now what? Then they brought us to a barrack. And then we went again into a sauna. And while we were in the sauna, she went into labor, our little Alice. There was another nurse on me. We were naked, and she delivered a little boy. We helped her. And there was one of the women who was in charge of the sauna, and we told her. So she came, and they came with a stretcher, and they took Alice and her little boy away. And we, now, can you picture that? The two nurses naked, we were all naked, but she delivered a little boy. And she said, if I make it, I call him Ivan, because maybe the Russian helped that I don't know. I don't think she didn't make it. But anyway, so we then got some clothes again, and then we walked into barracks again. But there were no beds. We were in Belsen. Belsen was, because I was only a short time in Auschwitz, Belsen was for us worse. We were laying on the floor, and then the clothes we get had lice. And all of a sudden we had lice. And we were scratching ourselves, and everybody, was. And I was together with about 4 or 5 girls, and we were sticking together with former nurses. And then we saw people, we didn't have anything to do. That was worse. You see, we didn't work. We were just laying there all day. And once a day they bring us a little soup or a little water. That was the worst. We had no water. Then we could go, so many together could go to the latrine. That was a house where and there was water running down. And each one had like a bowl and a little metal cup. So we would catch the water what came down, that we could clean ourselves with it or drink. I think that we didn't have water was even worse, as if nothing to eat. Wherever we could get a little water, we tried to clean ourselves. And then we saw every day more and more people died, and they had mountains. It was then cold. It was very cold, because this was February.
1945.
1945. And more and more, they couldn't even get up anymore. They were just laying there. Then one day a girl comes into the barrack and says, anybody wants to come and help and clean in the other room? And I volunteered. I said, if it's better than laying there doing something. So I volunteered. So there were 3 of us, and she took us to another barrack. And in this barrack, they had beds. And these were the girls who were who played music in Auschwitz, the musicians. And one girl was from Holland, another from France, from Hungary. And we cleaned their barracks, we swept it. But for this we got the skin of the potatoes, which they didn't eat, which was a little extra than what we had. And we were in a surrounding which was a little cleaner than laying on the floor in it was a tent really, in a big tent. And I try to remember Belsen. Maybe I put it out of my head because it was so bad. From this big tent they put us in smaller barracks afterwards. And then we saw on the end there was a big street, and all the barracks there was wire fencing around, And then they had also an oven there, all the way on the end, and I know that's where they bought and burned. And we saw that then we saw when they walked us sometimes, and then we saw men, there were camps where there only were men, and they looked even worse than we did. And then one day we saw that men had to take the dead and put them all, bring them there where they were burned. And the way they transported them, a man would take just 2 legs from a skeleton and pull it down the street. And this was we just looked at this and see them. We were standing there and see this man, the prisoners, and pulling this dead to be burnt, or some of them made big holes. One day, I was together with two girls, and they had typhus. They were former nurses from Cologne. And I hadn't typhus because the doctor, the last transport who went to Terezin, the doctor immunized us against typhus. He gave us injection, which I didn't realize at the time. But when I was in Belsen, I knew afterwards, I realized why I didn't get typhus. Because we ate the scraps what the others left. And there were more and more girls laying there, couldn't get up anymore. And all right. In the morning, every barrack threw the dead ones out. So in the morning, there were always a mountain of dead in front of each barrack. And we just hoped that it somehow, through the grapevine, it was told the war will end soon. But we didn't know how it will end soon. Until one day, then they didn't give us, all of a sudden they didn't give us anything to eat anymore. I said, what? We didn't see any Nazis anymore, but we didn't know what to do. Where do we go? And then we heard a noise coming. And he said, and I went, most of them were laying inside, they couldn't even get up or crawl. When I walked to the fence, and I was standing the wire fence, and I looked, and I see a tank coming down that road. And it was an English tank. And there were about 4 or 5 of us standing there. And then he came down and he said, and one of the girls was fluent in English, she spoke to him. And I could understand a little, I had a little English in school. And I said, give me something that I can tell the ones inside that you are here. And he gave me some crackers. And I went with his crackers to my friends. I said, look, the English are here, we are free. But looking at them, they were half dead already. The next day, they brought us crackers and they gave us something. Then the few next days it went, the English were wonderful to us. They came in with doctors and nurses and military men. A doctor and so many of the military went through the barracks and looked at, and put markers on their forehead, the ones who had to be taken out as soon as possible before they die. And so they came with ambulances and they took them away. There was a camp where the military had been, the Nazis and soldiers, which was just like a few miles down the road. A big, like an army camp. And that's where they made hospitals out of it. And then eventually, we were like, all my friends were sick. But there were 3 girls, one girl from Munich and one girl from Berlin. And we 3 were still all right. And we were in a little barrack then. And they would bring us food. The English, they would feed us, the healthy ones. First they took care of the sick ones, but the ones who were not sick, they gave us some different clothes, we could take baths. They sprayed us against lice and all this, whatever. Then there came packages. But we 3 girls nobody gave us anything. So I said, let's see, maybe there is a rabbi somewhere or anything. So I went out and asked one of them, is there anywhere? There was a rabbi, so I went to him, was in uniform. I said, Rabbi, we are 3 German Jewish girls. They were a relief from Hungary, from Czechoslovakia, but nobody was there to take care. send us anything. Says, nobody cares about us. We are just 3 girls. First of all, he gave me right away a package. Then I spoke with him I spoke a little English from school. He said, you speak English enough, I make you an interpreter. He gave me a band, it says an interpreter on it. So you go down there was a kitchen where they cooked for everybody, like the field kitchen. And there was a Hungarian cook and an English soldier who was in charge, one a Scotchman, one Irishman. And you be the interpreter there for the Hungarian cook who speaks a little German. So from that day on, they took us from this little room. One day they burned the old camp, and we saw it burn. The English came with those big bulldozers and bulldozed the whole thing. But before this, we saw them make the Germans who they caught, who were still there, they had buried the dead ones. And we were standing and watching them. And also, before the camp was burned, they went to the surrounding towns and brought people in with carloads and marched them through the camp to see. They didn't believe it. And they lived only a short distance away. And I believe it. The people did not know it was off limit. The average person who was not involved in this, they didn't know what was really going on there. They didn't. But that made them look. They walked them through the whole thing and made them see how we looked and the mountains of that people. So when after it was all burned, we were all transported to the military barracks. And there we were 3 girls in one room, and then for the first time I had a real bed with white linens. And to me, and then there were showers, and we could wash. And they dressed us, they gave us army pants, dark blue pants, and light blue shirt. And then they gave us lipstick, which we were not even used to. But the English girls, they thought that picks up our morale. But with me was that we could wash ourselves and had a clean bed. And because I was an interpreter, I was allowed to eat in the officers' hall, and to sit there on the table and eat like a human being. To me, this was like I was born again. It was so important, to be treated like a human being again. And shortly after, I tried to find out what happened to my friends who they took away in the park. But 2 of them died afterwards, even after the liberation, because the typhus took them. And a lot of them were afterwards sent to Sweden. So 3 or 4 of my friends went to Sweden. And the ones who were well, one day they said all the Polish girls or Polish boys or girls who want to go back, we come with big trucks and everything. So we looked out, not one, they were empty. Nobody came. Nobody wanted to go back. I see the trucks, they were lined up. Nobody wanted to go back. They knew that. So they stayed there. Now, the English tried really, they took good care of us. They even made socials. They had movies. And we communicated amongst each other. We tried to find out if there is anybody from the family. I tried to find out if there was anybody but I never found anybody.
Irene, we just have another minute or so. Could you just tell us what happened to Charlie and your reunion?
when I felt better and I regained weight, I went to the office there who was in charge, and this was Miss Montgomery in Belgium. And I said to her, I want to go back to my hometown because I want to find out if anybody came back from my family or from my friends. And she gave me a letter of introduction. They said there is a bus going to pick up care packages, they will take you along. It was English military. And they took me to Cologne. And in Cologne I went to the hospital where I had been, and there was a Jewish community was in the hospital. They established a Jewish community that was in June 45. And when I came there, I met somebody who had come back already from Theresienstadt. And he told me, mother, Mrs. Lichtenstein, grandfather, my boyfriend Charlie, his brother and sister are alive in Theresienstadt. And in a few weeks they will return. And from there I went, I'd more like hitchhiked to Koblenz, and that's where my grandparents had lived, my mother were born, and I met one boy there who I grew up with who had also come back from Auschwitz. He lives in New York now, we are still good friends. And from there I went to Koblenz. This was the little town where I grew up. This was 16 kilometers from Koblenz. I hitchhiked there. At that time everybody hitchhiked on people. And I come to that was the street where I came was opposite the town, and I had to cross the river. There was a ferry going across. At that time, this was occupied by the American army, this part of Germany. And on the ferry were American soldiers. And I had one American soldier in Belsen had gone back to furlough to London, and he asked me if he could notify anybody. And I gave him my brother's address in America and my uncle's in England. And he brought, when he came back a week later, he brought a telegram for my brother. He was that time in the army. I'm happy you're alive, on his army address. And when I was on the ferry going to my hometown, there were American soldiers. I said, here, I come from a concentration camp, and I have an American, my brother is in the American army. And they looked at me as if I was from the Mars. These soldiers hadn't seen anybody from camp yet, and also not somebody who is a sister of an American soldier. So they took me right away to the man who was in command of the town, who was a Jewish soldier from Brooklyn. And I told him where I come from and that I come from this town. And he said, write everything down what you want and we get you everything. But it didn't stay long. The American changed and the French came. But I went then, all right. Then I went to our house, and it was still there. No.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you so much.
I could talk for a week, and we wouldn't cover everything.
I know. Thank you.
And that's where he found me a couple of weeks later.
Your brother?
No,
Charlie.
Charlie. My brother was here in 47 when I came. He was on the boat. And I got married 2 months later.
Amazing story. You've covered so much ground.
Not really.